Hi, third grade. Sorry, I'm a little late getting this last thing posted. Soldier dogs. I've been looking through some of the work that you've sent me. Keep sending it in. You guys are doing a great job, and that helps me keep up with my grading. So I appreciate it. So, yesterday in our book, we learned that Matt's brother has died in the war. Chapter 8. It's in the middle of the night, 12:45 a.m. It's after midnight. Matt staggered across the crypt, faces turned toward him, arms reached for him. The clamor of hundreds of people pounded in his head. Columns rose like stone guards, his eyes blurred with tears. Missing in action. That's what the telegram had said. The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret that your son, Marine Private Eric Dawson, has been reported missing in action. So, boys and girls, there is hope that he might still be alive, but they don't know where he is right now. Eric was MIA, missing in action. Gone, vanished. Matt stumbled and almost fell. He caught himself on the wall and just stood there, his forehead pressed against the cool stone. Eric's okay. He has to be. They'll find him again. He was just missing. He wasn't KIA, not killed in action. He's just missing. Tears leaked out of Matt's eyes. He heard the click-clack of Chief's nails on the floor behind him and felt Chief's snout nuzzling his hand. He couldn't even stand to look at Chief, not now. Chief didn't know what was happening. He didn't know the world was at war. He didn't know they were hiding from bombs. He didn't know Eric was gone. The room spun around Matt. He couldn't take it. He couldn't just stand around in a crypt while Eric was missing somewhere in the Pacific, halfway around the world. He needed to be alone. Matt heard his father call his name, and he lurched toward an alcove in the shadows, away from the hustle and bustle of the main room. The alcove was dark and cool, but Matt's anger suddenly burned as bright and hot as a bomb. He didn't have to go, Matt muttered, his voice echoing against the stone. Not so soon. Why did he go? Why did they let him? If only Eric hadn't enlisted, he'd still be safe. They'd still be together. And even if he'd enlisted later, at least he wouldn't be MIA, missing in action now. Instead, he'd left Mom and Dad behind. He'd left Matt behind. His eyes stinging with tears, Matt stumbled into a flight of stairs. And he ran, and he kept running like he was trying to escape the news, and found himself in a narrow stone hallway. Through a window, he saw the yellow and orange light of the Germans' glowing flares reflecting against the branches of a tree. Then he caught sight of pale, stern faces staring down at him. Cold, unforgiving faces. His heart clenched, and he jerked backward. And then he realized they were just statues. He took a slow breath and heard a rumbling buzz. As he cocked his head, the noise turned into a mechanical growl. It was the German bombers, louder than before, and closer than before. They were directly overhead. Matt panicked. He spun back toward the air raid shelter, but when he squeezed through the door, the smell of dirt surrounded him. He'd gone in the wrong direction. He darted into the closet stairway and He darted into the closest stairway and ran up a flight of stone stairs to a wide balcony. He wasn't trying to reach the shelter anymore. He wasn't trying to escape the danger. He was trying to escape from that moment when his father had shown him the telegram. The telegram that said his brother was missing in action. Matt skidded to a halt in a chapel with rows of stained glass windows. He slumped against the wall, then slid down to the floor and pulled his knees to his chest. Eric was still alive. Matt knew it. He was probably washed ashore on a deserted Pacific island, building an SOS signal on the beach with rocks or logs. One day soon Matt would see him again, and they'd play ball and eat ice cream. Matt squeezed his eyes shut. When he'd been 6 or 7 years old, Eric had taken him to buy ice cream cones on a hot summer day. The top scoop of Matt's cone fell off and smeared down his shirt. He cried. So Eric had given Matt his shirt, which was so big it fell to Matt's calves, that's down below his knees, like a baggy dress. He hadn't cared that he'd looked silly. He'd been so proud to wear Eric's shirt, he hadn't even minded dropping his ice cream. Opening his eyes, Matt took a shaky breath. He needed to be strong. Eric would be fine, and Eric made Matt promise to take care of Chief, so that's exactly what he would do, which meant he needed to get back to the shelter. He rose unsteadily, and the click-clack of claws on the stone floor almost made him laugh. He didn't need to find Chief. Chief had found him. "Chief," he called, "I'm in here." The click-clack came faster as Chief trotted closer. He barked twice, sharp warning barks, and started to run. Matt felt a jolt of panic at the warning barks. Something was wrong. He started toward Chief, and just then a bomb exploded outside. The stained glass windows shattered, and the surge of air felt like a slap on Matt's face. The sound deafened him. He couldn't hear. His fear made his knees buckle, and the blast slammed him to the ground. Billows of dust blinded Matt, and an ache pounded in his head. He couldn't hear Chief anymore. He couldn't hear his own gasps and whimpers. He couldn't hear anything at all. Chapter 9. When Matt ran into the corner of the stone cave, Chief hesitated beside the girl pup and the old ones, at least until he realized that the boy pup wasn't in the corner. He'd left the cave through a different tunnel. He was gone. Chief broke free from the pack and dashed across the cave. He smelled a whiff of perfume, the tang of tears. He heard a wheezing breath, the crinkle of paper, the shuffle of a shoe against the floor. And then he caught Matt's trail. It led into a stairway. Chief followed, loping higher until he lost the scent in the overwhelming smell of fresh dug earth. Chief put his nose to the ground. He ran in one direction, then the other. There, he found the trail again. Excuse me. There he found the trail again, and he heard the iron birds flying closer in the sky. He heard the whistle of fire rocks falling, bombs. He ran toward Matt and scrambled around a corner, slipping on the smooth stone. He heard the boy pup's breathing. He smelled the salty dampness of his sadness. Matt yelled the sound that meant he needed help. "Chief!" Chief ran closer, trying to reach Matt before the fire rock hit the ground. He knew he couldn't win the race, but that didn't matter. Chief knew that Matt needed him. His muscles straining, he sped forward, and the fire rock boomed. The blast lifted Chief like a pair of massive jaws, grabbing the scruff of his neck. It shook him, and it tossed him across the room. Glass shattered across the floor with shiny, tiny, sharp teeth. Chief crashed into a wooden bench and slumped limply. His vision turned black, but he woke suddenly, moments later. Maybe moments. He couldn't tell. The glass wasn't falling anymore. The iron bird was flying away. It was getting quieter. And Matt was gone. Still disoriented, confused by the blast, Chief inhaled, took a deep breath in. He needed to find the boy pup. He needed to find Matt. But 1,000 new scents swirled in the air, scorched cloth and charred leaves and melting rubber. Which way had Matt run? Either outside into the night or higher in the old building. Surely even a human wasn't foolish enough to run higher toward the iron birds. Except Chief knew that humans didn't have much sense. That's why they needed dogs to look after them. So he prowled carefully, closer, sniffing deeply, alert for the slightest hint of Matt. And a familiar smell tugged at him. He turned suddenly and ran through the wreckage toward the door leading to the lawn. Just there in the doorway he found the woolen hat that smelled of Matt's father, of the older boy Eric, of the pregnant woman, and of Matt. He must have come this way. When Chief ran outside, the trail ended in the stink of the burning city, charred cloth and blistered paint. He growled in frustration, his ears pricking for the sound of Matt's voice, for Matt's footsteps. But there were too many noises. Maybe Matt had run back to the den, the house. Chief would look for him there. And if he didn't find him, well, he'd keep looking. When a pack member was in trouble, you never give up. Have a great evening. Get out and enjoy the sun.